January 3rd, 2026, the world woke up to a photograph. Not a natural disaster, not a plane crash, a single image taken on the deck of a warship under cold white floodlights somewhere in the Atlantic at midnight. Nicolás Maduro, sitting president of Venezuela, the man who had held absolute power for over a decade, blindfolded, zip-tied, standing on the flight deck of the USS Iwo Jima. Maduro called it a kidnapping. The Pentagon called it Operation Absolute Resolve. But the real question, the one that made generals from Moscow to Beijing put down their morning coffee and look at each other without speaking, wasn't who did this. The question was, how? How do you penetrate a capital city with heavy air defenses, thousands of armed bodyguards, and intelligence backing from at least 2 hostile superpowers, extract a sitting head of state and his wife from their private residence, put them on a helicopter, fly them to sea, and board them onto a warship without triggering World War III? The answer isn't one person. It isn't one unit. The answer is an ecosystem, designed, trained, and operated with zero margin for error. Here's how it works. Nobody flies straight into an enemy's house without knocking first. Or, more accurately, nobody flies straight into an enemy's house without having someone already inside for months. Operation Absolute Resolve didn't begin on the night of January 3rd. It began in darkness, in silence, under a different name. Operation Southern Spear, a sprawling umbrella campaign stretching across the Caribbean. And the first people deployed didn't carry rifles, they carried something more dangerous: information. The CIA needs no introduction, but fewer people know its operational partner, ISA. The Intelligence Support Activity, known in certain circles simply as the activity. If the CIA is the brain of the American intelligence network, ISA is the peripheral nervous system, small, anonymous field operatives embedded deep inside the target environment before anyone else arrives. For months before the operation, they were in Caracas, building 3D maps of the presidential compound, logging every guard rotation, the intervals, the head count, the patrol routes, identifying faces in Maduro's personal security detail, tracking his schedule with a precision his own chief of staff probably didn't have. They knew what time he ate dinner. They knew which room he slept in. They knew which door opened fastest to the outside. A spear can't strike if nobody has already marked the target. But knowing the way in isn't enough. You also need to blind everything that could see you coming. Venezuela is not a soft target. They operate the S-300 VM air defense system, Russian-built, designed to shoot down stealth aircraft, cruise missiles, and other things you'd rather not think about by name. A US helicopter flying into Venezuelan airspace is in theory a perfectly destroyable object within a matter of seconds. In theory. But when the operation launched, Venezuela's radars went dark. Not because of a technical malfunction, because US electronic warfare units had suppressed the entire electromagnetic spectrum across a wide enough radius that the systems simply stopped working the way they were supposed to. Screens showed static. Communications behaved strangely in ways Venezuelan technicians would spend weeks trying to explain. And simultaneously, on a completely different layer of the battle, PSYOP went to work. Psychological Operations, officially rebranded Military Information Support Operations, because psychological operations apparently made too many people uncomfortable during congressional hearings. Don't fire bullets. They don't need to. They send messages. Carefully designed messages to exactly the right people at exactly the right moment. to Venezuelan military commanders, to the men holding satellite phones that night. The content of those messages has never been made public, and probably never will be. But the result is on record. No significant Venezuelan military response occurred for the entire duration of the operation. Winning a fight without firing a weapon is better than winning a fight. If you can convince someone that resistance is futile before a single shot is fired, you've achieved the same objective at a fraction of the cost. The pen is mightier than the sword. The US military just prefers to have the sword too, just in case. Eyes blind, ears deaf. Now the ghosts move. The 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, Night Stalkers. If Delta Force and DevGru are the tip of the spear, the Night Stalkers are the hand that delivers the tip to exactly where it needs to go. In the dark, through terrain that shouldn't be flyable, with tolerances measured in centimeters. The 160th was born from failure. In 1980, Operation Eagle Claw, the attempt to rescue American hostages in Iran, ended in catastrophe. Helicopters colliding in the desert, 8 soldiers dead, the mission collapsing before it had truly begun. The US military looked at the wreckage and made a decision. This would never happen again. The Night Stalkers are what that decision looks like 40 years later. On the night of January 3rd, the helicopters lifted off from the deck of a warship in the Caribbean. Not at altitude, never at altitude. Night Stalkers fly nap of the Earth, so low over the ocean surface that the rotor wash nearly touches the waves, low enough to stay beneath whatever radar coverage remained. Then inland through the mountain terrain ringing Caracas in absolute darkness, navigating entirely on night vision optics and the thousands of hours of training drilled so deep into muscle memory that fear no longer has room to exist. Night Stalker pilots don't measure skill in flight hours. They measure it in what they can do that no one else will attempt, in conditions that would ground every other aviation asset on the planet. They put the operators down on the right coordinates with centimeter precision, not because they were lucky, because they'd done it thousands of times before, in the dark, until it stopped being a skill and started being a reflex. Night Stalkers aren't famous. They prefer it that way. The operators they carry tend to make enough noise for everyone.
Touchdown. And this is where everything gets very, very quiet. Delta Force and DevGru, the 2 Tier 1 units of US Special Operations Command, don't need a lengthy introduction. But there's something Hollywood consistently gets wrong about them. They don't arrive to make noise. They arrive so there doesn't need to be any noise. The difference between a conventional soldier and a Tier 1 operator isn't just fitness, isn't just training, isn't just hardware. It's the ability to control violence, to know precisely how much force is required, and to use not 1 ounce more than that. They don't come to create a bloodbath. They come to complete a task in the shortest possible time, with the smallest possible footprint, and leave as if they were never there. The presidential compound, the security detail neutralized, Nicolás Maduro and his wife Cilia Flores in custody. 0 American casualties, a fact later confirmed publicly by the President of the United States himself. The entire sequence, from the moment operators touched the ground to the moment they lifted off with the objective, played out through the white phosphor display of GPNVG-18 night vision goggles. No color, just cold white light, infrared lasers invisible to the naked eye, but blazing in the optics, and hallways cleared room by room, corner by corner, with the calm of people who have done this so many times that there is simply no space left in them for hesitation. But while the operators worked inside the compound, one question mattered just as much. Who was protecting them? Outside the perimeter, one JTAC, Joint Terminal Attack Controller. The name sounds technical. The job is simpler to describe. They're the person holding the switch to everything overhead. high above the city, invisible to radar, beyond the edge of Venezuelan airspace, or staged nearby Roosevelt Roads Air Station, F-35A stealth fighters were orbiting in silence, waiting for a single transmission. Any Venezuelan armored vehicle that dared to move toward the operational area that night would have become a straightforward math problem. GPS coordinates, altitude, weapon type, time of flight to target. Answer: Ash. The JTAC is the only person authorized to solve that equation. They stand at the intersection of ground forces and air power, communicating simultaneously with both, calculating target coordinates under maximum pressure with zero tolerance for error. Not because the system demands perfection in theory, but because an error means a bomb hits the wrong building. Nobody in the special operations community lives with that. That night, the JTAC never had to transmit. No armored vehicles moved, no clearance was issued. A finger rested on the switch and didn't press it. Sometimes the threat is more powerful than the action. Mission complete. Time to disappear. Exfiltration is where more operations have unraveled than most people realize, after the hard part was already done. The element pulled back to the extraction point. The objective was loaded aboard. Night Stalkers ran the terrain in reverse, hugging the hillsides out of Caracas, back across the dark water. But offshore, on ships sitting in the fog, another force was waiting at full readiness. QRF, Quick Reaction Force, and the PJs, Para-Rescuers, Air Force Special Operations personnel whose entire existence is organized around one mission: going to get people back. These men don't appear in the viral photograph. They weren't in any of the news coverage. But if a Night Stalker helicopter had gone down in Caracas that night, if an operator had been wounded, stranded, cut off, QRF would have launched, and the PJs would have launched with them, carrying trauma kits, rifles, parachutes, dive gear, and every skill that 2 years of the longest training pipeline in the US military can produce. The PJ's motto is that others may live, not a marketing slogan. That's the job description.
On January 3rd, QRF never launched. The PJs never needed to move. The symphony played through to the final note without a single measure going wrong, which is itself a remarkable thing. Shortly after, Nicolás Maduro appeared in federal court in Manhattan, not as a visiting dignitary, not as a head of state, standing before a federal judge facing charges brought by the American justice system. A sitting president tried on American soil while his country still existed on the map. No modern precedent.
No modern precedent.
None.
None.
But here is the most important thing to understand about what happened. There was no lone hero in this story. No single Delta Force operator who did it all. No one CIA analyst who knew everything. Operation Absolute Resolve is proof of something the military has known for a long time, but rarely says out loud. U.S. Special Operations Forces are not superhuman individuals. They are an ecosystem. CIA and ISA built the foundation. Electronic warfare blinded the enemy. PSYOP paralyzed the will to resist. Night Stalkers delivered the tip of the spear to the right place at the right time. Tier 1 executed with absolute precision. JTAC held the kill switch above. QRF and PJ stood in the back with a promise: no one gets left behind. Every link did its job. Not one was missing. Not one was wasted. That's why the result was a photograph on the deck of the USS Iwo Jima, and not a diplomatic crisis, a wreckage field, or worse, names being read aloud in the silence at Arlington. If this machine made the back of your neck stand up, if understanding that it is operating right now, tonight, in places you'll never hear named, hit subscribe. Next time, we're going inside a mission that's still classified, an operation so buried that even its code name hasn't been released. And it made this one look straightforward.